All right, so here we have the humerus, which is the bone of the arm, and this means that it is found between the shoulder and the elbow. So since I can't really get the entire bone into frame, we'll start here at the proximal end of the humerus. So this would be the end of the humerus that's found at the shoulder joint. So this ball-shaped piece of bone that's right here on the medial side of the humerus is called the head of the humerus. And the head of the humerus is what articulates with the glenoid fossa on the scapula. So together, the scapula and the humerus make the shoulder joint. So you'll see on the opposite side of the head of the humerus that there are two bony projections, and these would be on the lateral side of the humerus here. This large one here is called the greater trochanter, and that's the more lateral of the processes, and as its name implies, it's also the larger of the two processes there. And then there's a smaller process right here that's called the lesser tubercle. These are both muscle attachment points. Both of these tubercles are where the rotator cuff muscles of the shoulder joint, or I should say from the shoulder, attach to here. So between the two tubercles here, you'll see a groove, and this groove is called the intertubercular groove. It's also called the intertubercular sulcus, and this is where a tendon of the biceps brachii muscle rests. So we've looked at the proximal end there at the shoulder joint. Let's flip it around and take a look at the distal end of the humerus. So the distal end of the humerus is where the elbow joint is located. So we see several large bony projections here, as well as a couple of depressions as well. This projection here that's more spherical in shape, that's called the capitulum, and this is where the bone in the forearm called the radius articulates with. The end that is a little bit more shaped, kind of like an hourglass here, that's on the medial side, is a structure called the trochlea, and the trochlea is where the ulna articulates with. So we've got two bones in the forearm, right? The ulna, which articulates with the trochlea here, and on the medial side of the humerus. On the lateral side of the humerus, we have this more rounded end called the capitulum, and the capitulum receives the radius, which is the lateral bone in the forearm there. Okay, so just above the trochlea here, we have a bony projection that's called the medial epicondyle. And if you accidentally hit this in the right way, it compresses a nerve that runs by the medial epicondyle, and it causes kind of a tingling pain in the forearm here. So this is what hitting your funny bone really is you're pinching the nerve against this medial epicondyle here. The lateral epicondyle is located, it's a little bit smaller, and it's located just above the capitulum here. So we have the medial epicondyle, the much larger of the two processes here, and then the lateral epicondyle, which was the smaller of the two processes there. So let's look at the indentations on the distal end of the humerus here. There's one on the anterior side here, and there's another one, if we flip it over, a much larger indentation on the posterior side here. So the one that's on the anterior side here, just above, or I should say that's just a little bit proximal to the trochlea, is called the coronoid fossa. And this coronoid fossa allows movement of the ulna when the ulna bone moves to essentially flex the forearm there. On the posterior side is a much larger indentation, again proximal to the trochlea here, and this indentation is called the olecranon fossa. And the olecranon fossa is what allows the ulna to lock into place when we straighten our forearm. Okay, so that's all the structures of the humerus. One last thing I'll wrap up with here is kind of how to tell a right humerus from a left humerus. And one way to do that is to find the anterior side. And so that means that if you're looking at the side, the easiest way to tell if you're looking at the posterior side is if you see this olecranon fossa here. So if you see that large indentation there, flip it over or find the other viewpoint where you don't see that. Now you know that you're looking at the anterior part of the humerus here. And then turn your attention towards the proximal part of it. So if you're looking at the proximal part, the anterior proximal part of the humerus, what you see is that you'll see that the head of the humerus will always point to the side of the body that came from. And so in this case, since the head is pointing to the right side, if we were to hold it up kind of vertically, this would mean that this is a right humerus. If we were looking at the anterior side and the head pointed to the left, then that would mean that that's a left humerus. In this case, I'm holding a right humerus here.